for tonight's headlines, we have the first taking contact of the regional directors of the World Bank with the Prime Minister, the government, and the government and the Houthis commit on at-risk conditions in Hodeidah. Welcome to our newsroom. The Prime Minister, Mr. Abdelkader Kamel Mohammed, has received in audience this Thursday morning in the Hall of Honors of the Prime Minister's Ms. Marina Weiss, Regional Directors of the World Bank for Egypt, Yemen and Djibouti. Introduced by Mr. Atou Sek, Resident Representative of the World Bank Group in Djibouti, Ms. Marina Weiss was accompanied by two close associates, including Tracy Marie Lane, Program Managers, and Maria Laura Sanchez Puerta, Program Managers for Human Development in Egypt, Yemen and Djibouti. In addition, the hearing was attended by the Minister of Finance and Industry, Mr. Ilyas Moussa Dawale, and the close associate of the Prime Minister, namely the Cabinet Director, Mr. Yusuf Awled Farah, the Technical Advisor, Mr. Ali Silai. The first contact of Ms. Marina Weiss was an opportunity for the Prime Minister to welcome him and a few success in his new position. Speaking, Ms. Weiss thanked the Prime Minister for the warm welcome and availability, and she said was ready to work closely with the government of Djibouti. Subsequently, the interview focused on the World Bank's portfolio of activities in Djibouti, including energy and private sector development. Abdelkader Kamel Mohammed outlined the actions undertaken and the reforms undertaken by the government of Djibouti in achieving the objectives of his long-term development plan. As for the World Bank Regional Director, she praised Djibouti's effort in implementing the Djibouti's government reforms effort. Ms. Weiss illustrated her remarks by mentioning the World Bank ranking doing business, in which Djibouti made a leap that propelled her into the list of the 10 most reforming countries in the world. On the other hand, Ms. Weiss mentioned the Human Capital Project launched by the World Bank Group. It consists of accelerating the accumulations of human capital by seeking to identify and supporting more effective investment and policy that can strengthen and improve the means to measure it. U.S. Africa Command Chief AFRICOM General Thomas Waldhauser said in a recent statement to the U.S. Congressional Committee that the port of Dorale provided today that is managed by the Djiboutians. Listen to him, please.
Testified, Djibouti had just taken that port over from the UAE. There's been some international court issues of adjudication. I won't get into that today. But the Djiboutians have run that port now for over a year. Based on data that we get from the embassy, the Djiboutians have, quite frankly, done a better job, been more efficient, and have had better throughput than when the Emiratis ran the port. I have spent time directly with President Anglais, talked with him and with the our ambassador there, and spoke with him about our concern that we need unimpeded access, because it's no secret that roughly 98% of the logistics support for Djibouti as well as Somalia and East Africa come through that port. That port is one of 5 entities in the overall Djiboutian port.
As every year on February 6, the Republic of Djibouti, like the other countries, celebrate the International Day Tolerance Zero for a total eradication of the practices of the young girls. This year's theme was Future Generations Without MGF, taking place at UNFD headquarters yesterday afternoon. The ceremony was chaired by the Minister of Women and Family, Ms. Moin Ahmed Hassan, the Vice President of UNFD, Ms. Hasna Ahmed Bilil, the UNICEF representative in Djibouti, the United Nations Coordinator in Djibouti, Ms. Barbara Menzi, and the managers of FNIAP, Amina Ulema, representative of the Women's Associations and Students, the Women's Family Directors, Ms. Fozia, made the presentations of the vision of strategy and abandonment of all forms of excision. Is a representative of Ms. Roqia also made a presentation of the actions carried out with the framework of MGF. Female genital mutilations cover all interventions that involve with altering or sacrificing women's genital for non-medical reason. They are recognized internationally as violations of the human right of women and girls. These practices also violate the right to sexual and reproductive health, to security. MGF are mainly used in 13 countries in Africa, but remain a common procedures even in some Asian countries. For a part, the Vice President of UNFD, Ms. Hasna Ahmed Bilil, said that the MGF is considered a violation of the human right and constitute a nefarious practices deeply rooted in the practice and customs of our society. As we know, she said, our young girl continues to suffer from our days. This ignoble act having no religious basis and strongly to their health. The Minister of Women and Family, Ms. Mumina Ahmed Hassan, stressed that this International Day Tolerance Zero MGF, that this more than 40 years, the Egyptian women through the UNFD fight against the MGF. The government promulgate a law condemning these practices. Several national programs were undertaken to sensitize, inform, and educate the populations in general, she said. On the morning of Thursday, February 7, 2019, the Minister of Energy, Yunus Ali Geddi, in the presence of the Secretary General, Mr. Mohammed Kilewais, and the Director General of the EDD, Mr. Jama Ali Gele, welcomed in his office a delegation of the World Bank composed of Mr. Eric Magnus Erstom, Emmanuel Pai, and Mr. Alain Bourguignon. During this visit, the World Bank and the EDD gave an update on the progress of the Sustainable Electrification Project. This project part of the fight against poverty and the improvement of the electrification rate is part of the continuations of effort already undertaken by the government of Djibouti and its development partners, in particular the World Bank. The Minister obtained the guarantee from the stakeholders of the accelerate of work so that the project evolves positively and that several households benefit from the electrify, and is delighted as for the assistance of the bank in the strikes of the sectors of the energy in Djibouti. The Minister of Muslim Affairs and Cultures, Momin Hassan Barry, who is visiting Cairo, had an interview with the Egyptian Ministers of Culture, Mr. Abdel Daim, during which the two officials emphasized the need to give new impetus to the cultural relations between the two countries. Two broader countries. This meeting is also part of the implementation and monitoring the memorandums of understanding signed between the two ministers. The meeting was attended by the embassy, by the ambassador of Djibouti in Cairo, Mr. Mohammed Ibrahim Roble, the Minister of Advisors, Mr. Shuaib Adjal, and the Director of Culture, Mr. Douali Hassan Ahmed. The Minister thanked his counterpart for the warm welcome while congratulating him on the successful completions of the first editions of the festival organized on the initiative of the Organizations of Islamic Cooperation. A delegation led by the Secretary General of the Prime Ministers of the Republic, Mr. Naguib Abdallah Mohammed Kamil, made a working visit to Japan from 5 to 9 February 2019. The Secretary General of the Prime Minister was accompanied by the Ambassador of Djibouti to Tokyo, Mr. Ahmed Ali, the Director of Humbly International Airport, Mr. Mohammed, and two advisors of the Embassy of Djibouti in Tokyo, Mr. Hassan Ibrahim Mohammed and Mr. Ahmed Daoud Mohammed. The head of missions met on Tuesday, February 5, with Japanese parliamentarian, Vice Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Kenji Yamada, and the Director General of Mr. Kato, head of Africa for International Cooperation Agency in Japan. The discussion is focused on ways and means of consolidating and strengthening relations between the two countries. This including encouraging Japanese companies to invest in Djibouti. On Wednesday, 6 February, the Secretary General met with Mr. Kentaro Santoro, special advisors to Prime Minister Abe. During this meeting, Mr. Naguib and his interlocutors welcomed the excellent relations between Djibouti and Japan. The discussions then focused on building a new international airport. Yesterday morning took place a heavy neurosurgery operation on a patient of 28 years who was present since 5 months. Syndromes of intracranial hypertension is going up to the bleedness. This patient is presenting a tumor of the cerebral pile called astrocytoma. This operation, which is first in our country, took place in the operating rooms of the General Peltier Hospital, was carried out by the French neurologist doctors Malian Dr. Dianka and his Djiboutian counterpart. The operation went well for several hours and was a great success, and this illustrates the good collaborations that exists at the General Hospital of Peltier between foreign and local specialists doctors. Like the two laboratories recently set up with the third Centers for the Conservation of Archaeological Excavations product will be operational within the Institute of Archaeological and Historical Research, known as IRA. IRA Director Mr. Salah Zakaria has commissioned an expert mission with the French archaeologist Xavier Guterres for the establishment of the Centers for the Conservation of Archaeological Furniture, all of which came from excavations conducted in the Djibouti by the majority of French and American foreign missions. Actually, these products are mostly stocked in France, University of Toulouse, thanks to the effort of the Professor Guterres. Once the establishment of the conservation centers, the director of the IRA Center, Mr. Salah Zakaria, planned to enter into the partnership with the partners for the restoration to the Djiboutian state of all the archaeological and paleontological collections which had temporarily exported for studies in France and the other countries. The delegations of the European Union in Djibouti yesterday afternoon invited the main media of the countries for a press lunch at Sheraton Hotel. This meeting was chaired by the ambassador of the European Union in Djibouti, Mr. Adam Kulak, and was attended by journalists from the nation, the Djiboutians RTD and Djib Life Radio, and journalists. During this lunch, Ambassador Kulak presented the project funded by the European Union in the Republic of Djibouti and in the region. He recalled the important role of the European Union in the socio-economic development in our country. In his speech, the Ambassador of the European Union said that the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and the Security Policy would visit Djibouti on February 13 next. During this visit, on the first kind meeting, Federica Mogherini will discuss with the Djiboutian authorities ways to develop the distinguished relations between Djibouti and the European Union. The ambassador of the Republic of Djibouti in Sudan, Mr. Ahmed Ali Barre, was received on Tuesday by Dr. Faisal Hassan Ibrahim, Vice President of the National Congress and Assistant to the President of the Republic. The ambassador sent a letters of invitations for the celebration ceremony of his 14th anniversary of the RPP party. In national sport, started the match of the 8th finals of the Djibouti Cup this afternoon at the Old National Technical Center, known as Municipal Stadium. 2 games were scheduled this afternoon, like Djibouti Telecom against the team of FC Dikil. The other matches scouted the stadiums against Arta and Solar 7. The first match between Djibouti Telecom and Dikil was won by the team of Djibouti Telecom on the score of 5 goals to 1. For the international scene, in Yemen, the government and the Houthis commit on a trip of the under conditions in Hudaydah. The government of Yemen was agree with the Houthis rebels to commit on a trip under conditions this afternoon. This is it for the news. Thanks for watching us.